Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. I wanted to put out a quick video today about the changes to master missions, and I recorded something this morning, I had it ready to go, I had it uploaded, and then everything changed again. So, there's been some final clarification in the last 36 hours on exactly how master missions are going to work, and how many of them we're going to get. And what's changed? Originally, we were only going to get a smallish number of master missions per day from dailies. So it was shifting away from dailies being the main source and towards map completion being the primary source of new master missions. This is changing, and so now it's going to be basically like it is in 3.7, except that your master missions will accumulate over days. So essentially expect to have considerably more access to master missions in the future if you're someone that plays Path of Exile most days, and if you play on the, if you play most days, it'll be pretty similar to currently. If you're a weekend player or twice a week player, then expect to have a lot more access to master missions. Now, this is interesting because the most common response that people have had to this is that this is a great change because it makes master missions more available. I actually think it's going to have a very unpleasant side effect, and that unpleasant side effect is that when you remove something's scarcity, when you make it much more common, it loses a lot of its value. You can see this if you look at the most powerful unique item that drops from Atziri, and I'm talking about any version of Atziri here, Uber or normal. The most powerful item that she drops is, of course, her flask. It's one of the most widely used items in the entire game. It's one of the most powerful items, unique items in the game, full stop. And it's generally a 1 or 2 chaos item because it drops 50% of the time from normal Atziri. Now, that's an extreme example of how an incredibly powerful item, potentially the second best, now that Synthesis has bottled Faith is back, it's going to be the third most powerful flask in the game, behind Wise Oak and Bottled Faith. But for a lot of builds, it is just flat out the best one that exists, and it's ridiculously cheap because it's ridiculously common, to the point that because that flask is so common, Atziri is not really worth doing. I think we're going to see a bit of that with the Masters. I think we're going to see a situation where players are going to skip Masters entirely because the rewards are so unlikely to be anything valuable because of the massive surplus of them in the economy. So, what are my thoughts on the different Masters? Alva, do her if you feel like it, but there's just not really any strong, compelling reason to do so, in my opinion. Some people obviously will disagree with this, but the double corrupt altar, it has its niche uses, but the times that you want one, you know, say for instance, if you farmed up a Rigwald's Quills and you're deciding to go for a double corrupt on it, then yeah, by all means, at that point, target farm Alva, but otherwise I think you can ignore her. Zana, I think, is just going to be check her, see if she's offering a synthesis mission or a valuable unique map. If not, don't bother. Niko, you'll always do if you're interested in delving at all. Delving's so lucrative that even if you don't do it, if you don't do it currently, you should. And then we have Jun. Jun is the one that's really going to get smashed by this change today. So with Jun, it's a lot of people misunderstand how the veiled items work, but essentially veiled items are a significant investment in acquiring a bunch of them so that you can earn a bunch of crafts that you can then either use for yourself or sell to other players. Now with the Jun crafts, the decrease in scarcity of veiled items between 3.7 and 3.8 is actually going to devalue them. Where previously I was expecting to be setting a veiled items at actually being quite a valuable item on my loot filter, now I think they're not going to be. So basically, I think there's actually a lot less reason to do Jun missions now that there's more of them. We'll have to see how this works in practice, but I actually think it would have been better to keep Jun encounters a bit rarer. As it is, I think the market's just going to get flooded with veiled items, especially now that the cat's out of the bag a bit more, that it's actually worth selling your items that are veiled. Like, you pick up every veiled item that drops and you sell it in your stash tab, or you put it in a stash tab for 5 chaos, and people will often PM you and say, hey, I want to buy all of your veiled quivers, especially if they're high item level and thus can roll the tiers of mods that give more XP. So with that in mind, yeah, that's the increase in supply of joint missions is going to make each master mission less impactful, which is then going to mean that I'm going to feel less interested in running them. But that's my thoughts. Obviously, some people do like the abundance, like the oversupply of goods in the market. If that's you, definitely speak up and say what you like about it. But I've always found that Path of Exile as a game is just more fun when when at least a sizable number of things are legitimately scarce. And in particular, when it is not items like Headhunter that are the scarce things, but when it's the small upgrades. So I would much rather a system like Synthesis where you could get an item for 10 exalts that would serve a function, and then you could get an item for 25 exalts that was 15% better. Or you could get an item for 150 exalts that was another 15% better on that 25 exalt item. Whereas now it's just basically the only really big thing in the Legion League, at least, was Headhunter. It was basically you get your 10 exalt multi-mod weapon, and then after that, the next item to get is Inspired Learnings and Headhunters. So yeah, I think it's better when there's a greater variety of rarities and that being removed. I think that these Master Mission changes end up missing the mark because of that. However, I think there will be a section of the player base that likes this, and that will be the solo self-found play everyday type. Those players will love the changes. I think they'll make trade leagues worse, they'll make solo self-found better, and ultimately perhaps it's just a change that's not designed for me, it's designed for other people. Anyway, that's my thoughts on it now. I had an entire Atlas strategy planned out around the idea of taking advantage of Master Mission scarcity in order to profit that is no longer going to work. So I'm going to rethink that, and I'll get something up on the Assassin shortly as well.